If you're somebody who likes to edit as you write, or if you are totally against this, you will want to keep on watching. Hello and welcome to The Right Mama with Jennifer Aline. I am a freelance writer, a social media manager, a mother of twin girls, and my debut women's fiction novel, That Age, is coming out hopefully before the end of 2020. I will admit that I have always edited my manuscript as I go. And yes, this is a very unpopular opinion in the writing community. A lot of people are very against editing as you go. However, today we're going to talk about the reasons I like to edit as I go, and we will end with a few of the cons when it comes to editing as you write. Let me give you a little bit of an idea what I mean when it comes to editing as I go. This doesn't mean that before I start writing, another paragraph a day later or another chapter where I left off, I don't start reading from the beginning of my manuscript and then start writing. That would be a little crazy. I usually will go and reread the page before where I left off. And that kind of helps me. And we're going to find out how it helps me and why I do this. First reason we're going to talk about is I edit as I go because it reminds me of where I left off. So, like I just said, I usually go about a page before where I'm going to start and I read. This may not mean I edit every word and every sentence because I may not need to, but I do reread that page before. A lot of people just like to jump right in and just go and just puke out every word on the page. However, I do like to go back a page, sometimes 2 pages, sometimes just a paragraph before, and read, just to remember where I was in the story. I don't want to just jump into the story not knowing exactly what happened before and then mess up the plot, mess up some character details, things like that. So the reason I like to edit as I go is so I know where I left off, so I'm correctly moving forward. The second reason I like to edit as I go is I believe it makes for a cleaner first draft. Again, this doesn't mean that every single time I start writing again the next day, I reread the entire book. I like to reread about a page before. And I do think that it makes for a cleaner first draft. And first drafts are not always great. They usually are horrible and filled with plot holes, character issues, voice weirdness. First drafts aren't great. However, I do think if I take that time to edit a little bit as I continue to write, the first draft won't be as nauseating as it could. So even if it's horrible at the end, in my mind, it could have been much worse. And that's another reason as to why I edit a little bit as I go, or I read a little bit as I go, because if it's anything, it just calms my brain when it comes to that official reread of that manuscript. And if it's bad, I just think it could have been much worse if I hadn't edited a little bit the entire time. The third reason that I like to reread or edit as I go is because it gets me really in tune with my characters. Of course, I really try to get in the shoes of my characters before I start writing. I have a whole outline that I create of them. I go on Pinterest, I look for pictures. I really like to get in the brains of my characters. However, when I go back and reread that page or two before I start writing, I remember these details about the character, or maybe the character was in this mindset. So then I can transition to the next part of the story correctly. I don't want to just jump in and start writing something happy if the character left off frustrated or jealous or angry. I want to make sure I am in the character's mind when I continue to write. And for me, it just flows when I read a little bit from what I'd written and then start back up. It all just flows. I'm able to really be that character. I like to write my stories first person, and I like usually about 2 or 3 different points of view. My book that's coming out at the end of this year is 3 different points of view. So sometimes I really do need to get into the character's mind so I'm not writing the personality of another character. I really don't want to confuse the readers. obviously. So that's important to me to make sure I am fully aware of what's going on in the character's life. So when I keep writing, it makes sense. The fourth reason I like to edit as I go is because I hate editing. This is the truth. I just hate the editing process. I like the creating and the writing process. I love marketing. I love collaborating, but I hate editing, especially content editing. So when it comes to the big bad editing process after you've written the book, I would rather it be easier than extremely stressful. And no matter what, to me, it's going to be stressful. Even if I get into my brain and say, this is great. No, when it comes to that big bad edit after edit after edit at the end, it may not be as tough, and maybe I won't have to do as much of it. But since we're writers and we're in the real world of beta readers, critique partners, multiple edits, and then repeat, usually this is more just a mindset game for me. And number 5, as to why I edit or reread as I write, is because it's very natural to me. Honestly, I have always done it this way ever since probably like high school when I really started writing novels. I've always gone back, read a little bit, and continued to write. I've never been one to just write, take a break, and then read it and then edit it. And I know that's a really great process for a lot of writers. However, that's never really worked for me. It's very natural for me to take a page or 2 pages, read, and then transition and flow into the story. That's always been how it is for me, and it's natural. So when it comes to editing as I go, I'm not somebody who's really going to be angry at myself for this process because it's something I've always done before I realized a lot of people look down at this or don't like this. It's worked for me, and if it works for you, do it. If it creates a good story, if you have good character voices, if you have conflict, if you have, the whole shebang of the story, and you edit as you go, keep doing it. Don't change something up just to fit into a certain community or fit in, for somebody else. Do what works best for you, your writing style, and your writing career. And so now I'm going to go over 3 of the cons that are very popular when it comes to editing as you go. And like I've said, a lot of people just like to write, let their entire story be thrown up on the page. Really sure why I keep saying puke and throw up. Come back later and edit their book. One of the cons when it comes to editing as you go is a lot of people believe it disrupts the creative flow. You are stopping yourself, looking back, changing up this and that, and then going back into writing. When a lot of people think if you just write, let everything out, it kind of gets those creative juices moving. Your story just works onto the page and your characters write for themselves, and it just continues the creative process. So sometimes people don't like to edit as they go because they'd rather just get that whole story out and not disrupt the creative process that works for them. The second con that a lot of people believe in is you will change the story the more you edit. This is one that is very true because my novel that I self-published in 2012 that I recently took off the shelves, I did not ever sit and just read it and enjoy it because I kept wanting to change things. And the more I realized I wanted to change things, I realized the story is changing. So a lot of people don't want to continuously go back and backtrack and edit a little bit and backtrack and edit a little bit because they're afraid that their story is going to change. And that does happen for some people. It's hard sometimes to, like I said, read your own stuff and not want to make changes, especially if your writing craft is improved. I change things, the storyline will change, the characters will change. And that's true for a lot of people. The third con that we're going to talk about when it comes to editing as you go is a lot of people do not like to edit as they write because they have a hard time keeping track of those initial changes that they make. So if they go back, some people like to keep track of every single change they make. And if you continue to go back and make changes, if maybe you're using, a Word doc and it underlines or highlights everything you change, your entire book will be one big highlight at the end if you go back and edit. And that's how some people work. So they don't want to go into that first editing draft and see a ton of highlights and not remember or be overwhelmed with the amount of changes they made. And some people don't do that. And they want to be able to keep track of what was there first, why they changed it, but they don't want to, write an entire journal or sidebar explaining every single change they make, why they made it. If that makes any sense at all. But really, the reason for number 3 is people don't always want to keep track of every single reason behind every single change. Whether it's changing, a comma to a period and starting a new sentence, some people want to keep track of all of that. And if you went back and changed everything and kept changing and changing, your story would be a hot mess of highlights and underlines and crossouts. Well, that was my video on the reason I like to edit as I go. It works for me, and if it works for you, don't feel guilty. Everybody writes differently, and that's great. That's what makes for different storytellers, different authors, different stories. So if you edit as you go, good for you. Keep it up. But I understand that this is an unpopular opinion, and that's okay. There's a lot of those out there in the world, and we move forward. So thank you for listening and watching this video. If you like this kind of content, subscribe below, give it a thumbs up, and ring the bell. I post videos every Friday, and if you ring the bell, you'll get notified as to when the videos are posted. So thank you very much for watching, and stay creative. And I went out to a coffee shop to write today. Stay creative and drink that coffee.